and thank you for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Paris Schutz has the evening off. Here's what we're looking at. An unprecedented moment in U.S. history as former President Donald Trump enters his plea on federal charges. Mapping out road closures for the upcoming NASCAR Chicago street race.
I would like them to go back to the drawing board.
Residents react to a new development plan that could remake hundreds of acres in the western suburbs.
AM radio is still extremely relevant.
Why the future of AM radio hangs in the balance.
When we tell them, no, you can live your normal, regular life after donating a kidney, they're very surprised.
And bridging the organ donation gap in Black and brown communities. But first, some of today's top stories. History is made in a Miami courtroom today as former President Donald Trump pleads not guilty to mishandling classified documents. Trump is the first former president to face federal criminal charges. He's facing 37 counts, including obstruction and unlawful retention of defense information. According to the indictment unsealed last week, Trump is alleged to have stored nuclear secrets and other sensitive material in unsecure locations at his Florida home. After the hearing, Trump flew to a campaign event in New Jersey. Waukegan is apparently the latest suburb looking to poach the Chicago Bears. Mayor Ann Taylor pitched the city to Bears President Kevin Warren in a letter. This letter was first reported by WTTW News. Taylor's pitch includes, quote, multiple large parcels, including lakefront property within 20 minutes of the PNC Center at Hallis Hall that could be developed into both the state-of-the-art stadium and entertainment district the team has publicly expressed interest in building. Waukegan's approach comes after the Bears said last week that Arlington Heights was no longer their singular focus for a new stadium. That's despite the start of demolition of the old racetrack there. Since then, Naperville has pitched itself to the Bears, as well as the Bears have resumed talks with the city of Chicago. At least 5 people are injured after a school bus overturns on the Dan Ryan Expressway. The crash occurred this afternoon on the inbound Dan Ryan near 38th Street. The Chicago Fire Department says all the victims were transported to local hospitals with non-life-threatening injuries. The bus driver refused medical assistance. Chicago Public Schools plans to spend nearly $1,000 more per student next year. The district released its $9.4 billion budget proposal and says it's adding $240 million in additional school-level funding. While fewer schools will face budget cuts this year compared to last, 1 in 10 will still see decreased funding. Under a preliminary budget proposal released in April, CPS had projected nearly 20% of its schools would see their individual budgets flatline or drop in the fall. The district now expects that total to be around 10%. Up next, details of upcoming road closures for the NASCAR Chicago street race. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
City officials are unveiling their latest plans for the NASCAR race event happening July 1st and 2nd. Their main message, plan ahead and take extra time getting around downtown this summer. WTTW News reporter Patty Wetley joins us now with more. Patty, so the course is on a few streets around Grant Park, but several streets beyond that will be closed, and that's starting Saturday, June 18th. Which streets will be most affected by the road closures?
I mean, the biggest impact is going to be on DuSable Lakeshore Drive, and then that's just going to ripple to every side street and alternate route. Starting June 28th, southbound, you're going to start feeling impacts at North Avenue. It's going to be closed at Randolph. Northbound, as of July 1st, you know, good luck getting past the museum campus, although they're trying to find alternate routes so that people can get to some of our best tourist destinations, but it's going to be gridlock.
It gives me a headache just thinking about it, Patty, meanwhile, because there's the Kennedy and all the construction that is happening there. Any idea if we'll get any relief from that
We
side?
will not get any relief.
No.
I asked IDOT. They responded back and said that due to the nature of the type of work that they're doing, even though a lot of times they'll take a break from construction during holiday weekends, not possible with the Kennedy. So those lane closures will remain in place. So even though that's kind of being promoted as an alternate route to Lakeshore Drive, locals are going to know that's not really an option either.
Certainly not as simple as
No.
just reopening the lanes
No,
if they close.
it's
That's not a
not.
possibility. Where can Chicagoans get additional resources about the road closures?
So NASCAR does have like a local information portion to its street race website, and they're also recommending that people get the OEMC app, which is the Office of Emergency Management and Communications, and they'll be updating things to the minute. We have the information on how to link to those in the story on our website.
Okay, and that's where we'll be to figure out how to get
Yes.
where you're going or just stay
I got to
home.
figure it out for myself.
Yes, we do. All right, Patty Wiley, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Patty's full story on our website. That's at WTTW.com/news. And while you're there, here's some more headlines to check out. Hundreds of acres of vacant land in the western suburbs could be in line for a major makeover. It's land that Crown Community Development has long owned and now wants to use for housing, civic space, retail, and distribution warehouses. Those warehouses have been sprouting up across Chicagoland, especially with the recent explosion of online shopping. As Chicago Tonight's Nick Blumberg reports, company officials say the Grove is a well-balanced plan, but some neighbors want to see it blocked.
When Crown first came to Sugar Grove, Jennifer Conan wasn't interested.
I ran for office in 2019, opposed to that plan.
Conan now serves as Sugar Grove's village president. The original plan she ran against would have brought millions of square feet of distribution warehouses to town.
8 million square feet for me was going to define the village in a way that I didn't want it defined.
We're coming back in now with what we think is a terrific plan that's very balanced, that includes significant residential on the south side as well as reducing the amount of distribution that we had originally proposed on the north side by 56%.
Crown's new proposal still calls for a significant amount of industrial and business space, including warehouses, along Route 47 north of Interstate 88 on land that's currently just trees and unused farmland. South of I-88, a mix of residential, retail, and civic space, what they're calling a town center.
That includes a stage where we'll have outdoor concerts in the summertime, as well as a skating rink in the wintertime, and a fishing pier, a beer garden. We'd love to have a beer garden out there, as well as a farmer's market.
Sugar Grove's Conan says the new proposal and better community engagement from Crown has helped win her over.
We as a village need more residents. We need more commercial and things to do for our community. We need a larger tax base. We can't put that burden solely on homeowners. So this offers It offers all of it, which is why I like it.
The plan calls for Sugar Grove to annex the development and make the property a part of the village. Some residents who live on unincorporated land nearby say they're worried about having a voice in the process.
This area across the road here, this is all set for warehousing. And close to the road here, they've got some like small offices.
Dale and Lisa Essling have lived on several acres in unincorporated Blackberry Township just north of the village for 3 decades. The 3 other corners of the intersection where their property sits are part of the warehouse portion of Crown's proposal.
And then across the road here to the south of CV is their fueling station that they're not calling a truck stop.
Part of the deal involves granting a tax increment financing district for the land, but the Esslings say that tax break could put a burden on village residents down the road. And they argue TIFs should be for land that's blighted and needs to be developed.
It's been that way for 30 years. It doesn't need to be developed. Crown wants to develop it. And we don't have a problem with Crown building houses.
You know, something that actually fits in is what we really want.
I would like them to go back to the drawing board. I would like them to listen to us and our concerns as far as, warehouses, increasing the truck traffic, pollution, light, noise, and I would like them to do something different.
Molly Reimer is another neighbor opposed to the project. She also lives on unincorporated land, relying on well water and a septic system. Reimer says she and her husband grew up in a town whose water supply was tainted by the dangerous industrial chemical trichloroethylene.
That's one of my biggest concerns is our water and just, the environment around us, making sure that stays safe and clean and healthy for everybody that lives there.
But Crown officials say the project will go through extensive reviews to ensure health and safety and proper traffic flow. Jennifer Cowan says the company is committed to engaging neighbors whether or not they live in the village of Sugar Grove.
We've listened to the community, we've heard the community, we've modified the plan accordingly, and we're going to be delivering significant amenities for the community at large to be able to enjoy.
For residents like the Esslings, other worries are less about this specific development and more about the character of small-town life.
Rural America doesn't mean that every time there's something that's an open farm field, we got to think of another use for it.
But Sugar Grove's Conan says thoughtful development and a new town center can help create an economically sustainable future for its residents.
They'll shop, they'll dine, they'll go for a walk, they'll fish, they'll enjoy life here in Sugar Grove that we don't really have that place today.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Nick Blumberg.
Crown says after last week's meeting, they heard from multiple residents supportive of the project, including some who came in skeptical. But opponents have vowed to continue their fight. And we should note that a senior Crown employee and a family member serve as WTTW trustees. More than 40% of all radio listening is done in cars. So when most of the car companies manufacturing electric vehicles started dropping AM radio, there was major pushback. Now, there's an effort in Congress to save AM radio, and Ford recently reversed course and is issuing a software update to electric models so its customers can still listen to AM stations. Here to talk about the future of AM radio are Mary Sandberg Boyle, Vice President and General Manager at WGN Radio 720 AM, Rufus Williams, the morning host on WVON Radio 1690 AM, and Ariane Nettles, Director of Audio Journalism Programming at Northwestern University's School of Journalism. Good to see all three of you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Mary, let's start with you, please. Why is it important to keep AM radio available?
It's very popular. It is a public service issue and a public safety issue. It is the way to, when cell towers are down and the internet is down, AM radio can still reach millions and millions of people. And so that makes it, that right there is important.
Certainly in those disasters, we all know the importance of radio.
Sure.
WVON AM, which of course serves Chicago's Black community, was started 60 years ago by Melody Span Cooper's father. She now runs both that station and the Latino station, WRLL AM, under the Midway Broadcasting Corporation banner. We also spoke with her earlier today.
I'm heading to D.C. right after this call to lobby Congress tomorrow. I'm sitting with 7 or 8 Congress people talking about the importance of this band and the information that we deliver to constituencies across this country, not just Black, not just Latinos.
Rufus, you're, of course, a morning host on WVON. Talk about what your audience would lose, what WVON listeners would lose without access to AM radio.
Well, this is where we get context. This is where we get stories. AM radio is highly localized, and all national stories begin someplace. They begin local. This is where it is. The need for us to be able to reach people, not only at WVON in Chicago, but a rural station someplace else. The AM radio, the AM stations are critically important. We give information that helps people get through their day, that helps people get through the traffic, that helps people get through everything. And we, with talk radio, which is mostly on AM radio, can really delve into issues that are important to our people, important to our constituents, whoever and wherever they are. It's the whole community aspect of what AM radio does that makes it work for everyone.
Ariane, what do we know about why the car companies tried to drop AM radio?
So what we know is that because of the battery that powers the motor in these electric vehicles, it causes an interference, a very loud noise that makes it so that you can't actually listen to those AM stations. But instead of perhaps fixing it, companies like Tesla decided to just not include AM radio as an option for people buying those cars, and then other electric vehicle makers just followed suit.
Why do you think they did that?
Well, I think that oftentimes a lot of our most innovative companies are sometimes in a bubble, and they realize that maybe people in their circles and the people that they talk to may be able to have different listening habits, but they may not necessarily be in touch with the entirety of our society. And we know that AM is so important for people everywhere. Even in Chicago, half of our radio listeners still listen to AM, of course. But then, you know, like was said before, people in rural areas, people who are able to where that's really the main signal that they may be able to get, because AM is technologically easier to transmit to them.
Randy, it challenges the sensibility to think that those who can make an electric vehicle can't figure out how to have AM radio in that electric vehicle. So there must be something more, usually something capitalistic and competitive, to them not having it there, because to think that what we can do, looking to go to Mars, looking to go to all these other places, not to be able to have AM radio just challenges the sensibility.
You think they'd be able to do both?
Yeah, they actually did create it. And so Ford, when they went backwards and backtracked, they said, you know, that
we've got the software for it. Oh, look, we found a fix, everybody. So there is a bipartisan bill in Congress that's also supported by the Federal Communications Commission. Mary, could that save AM radio? And do you think that's just a temporary solution, or could it save AM for life?
I think it's going to save it for life, because it's a violation of the FCC to not have the AM transmitting in the vehicles, and they're having to think long term on this, because for every one AM transmitter, it would take 14 full FM powered stations to cover the same coverage, and even more cell towers. So the efficiency of AM broadcast, you know, it's much more efficient and cost effective to have that in a vehicle than it is to think we're going to make up for it with cell towers.
And to that point, you know, Rufus, do you think that, for example, could you reach the same audience with your show, you know, via internet or podcast compared to on AM radio?
I think about the people who listen to my show, and the demographics would suggest that very often what they use and how they get information is how they get information. An older set is not really looking to find new ways of getting information. I have people, one listener in particular, who talks about having his transistor radio with a low antenna that he goes around and listens to, so he can listen to what we're doing. As Mary mentioned earlier, the safety issue is really one that cannot be disregarded. It is critically important when we think about how people get information. And so often when the FM frequency goes out, when these disasters hit, it is AM radio that's able to still get through walls, to get through other places, to really continue to provide the signal. So whether it's just listening to the wonderful programming that we do on the morning show on WVON, or whether it's really getting things that are critical to your safety, AM radio it's critical in this process.
Well, and as journalists, like covering disasters, I think, you know, we all know, like when the cell towers go down, I covered Hurricane Katrina, cell towers were down. Radio was all that we had at the time. Mary, sorry, you were...
Well, and as Rufus said earlier, it helps give you context. You can get an alert on your phone that says there's a disaster, there's a shooting in Highland Park on the 4th of July, and then people turn to the radio to actually get what is unfolding here, what should we avoid, are they finding the person, you know, the context, you can't get that from an alert.
Ariane, a lot of niche talk programming, you know, we can get that on podcasts, a lot of it's internet-based satellite radio. Do you think this is just part of the evolution of radio? Because we don't have, you know, CD players or 8-track players in our cars anymore either.
Yeah, I think conversely, unlike those where perhaps we just replace them with streaming services, I don't think that radio can be replaced. And yes, it's true that we have more people doing podcasts and on-demand radio listening for at least some of their news, about 25%. However, you know, kind of going back to the idea of right now, when you need to know what is happening right now, you still turn on your radio. And that's really true from around the world. And I think that it's sometimes a lack of realizing the equity of it all that can sometimes be lost, and making sure that safety and information and news is fairly distributed to everyone.
Mary, this is something that you just hit on a minute ago, but if AM radio were to go away, could WVON or any radio station, for that matter, find a spot on the FM dial? How would that even work?
Well, the reach is just so much smaller, so you could get a spot. Also, you can stream radio. You can access it different ways, but the technology of getting it that way is different than what's in a vehicle that takes the AM signal from a transmitter. Also, it's cumbersome right now to get to those streaming platforms while you're in a vehicle. Just like on TV at home, to go to the different platforms is a little more difficult for users. So they need to be able to decide, if I want to be able to just listen to the radio, I need to have the radio in the car. I don't want to go through a few steps to go to an app and listen that way.
Okay, something that I'm sure that all of you will be keeping an eye on. I know we certainly will as well. Thanks to the three of you for joining us. Of course, Mary Sandberg-Boyle, Rufus Williams, and Ariane Nettles. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Up next, bridging the organ donation gap in the brown and black communities. But first, a look at the weather. Historically, the medical mistreatment of people of color has resulted in the distrust of a system intended to save lives. With health conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, and kidney disease on the rise in black and brown communities, reporter Joanna Hernandez tells us how a group of physicians is working to restore trust in the organ donation process.
Meet the team working to break down language barriers.
¿El apetito bien? Sí, está comiendo ligeramente, no tan pesado, ¿ve?
At UI Health, the Spanish-speaking clinic is helping patients through the kidney transplant process.
Es bueno porque así se da uno cuenta, se quita uno de todo de que muchas cosas que no entiende médicamente y ellos lo traducen a uno y le entiende uno la situación de cómo está uno.
52-year-old David Rodriguez has had 2 kidney transplant surgeries. He's in today for a checkup.
Se demora unos 3 a 6 meses en recuperarse, más o menos. Oh, okay.
The clinic is part of the UI Health Kidney Transplantation Program at UIC Hospital. Dr. Jorge Almario Alvarez is one of the doctors who spearheaded the initiative.
We decided to start a Spanish-speaking clinic to try to make more comfortable these interviews with the people, try to clarify all the doubts, and in that way also people may feel more comfortable to ask questions.
Dr. Alvarez says his vision for the clinic is to bridge the information gap in the Latino community.
Sometimes there are some cultural barriers about the surgery, that is something complicated, too dangerous, which nowadays is not like in the past. The outcomes nowadays in kidney transplant are very well.
On the south side of Chicago in the Chatham neighborhood, Harry Wilkins is on a similar mission.
Nationally, there's over 106,000 people waiting for an organ. Most of those are kidneys, and the overwhelming majority, 60% of those, are black and brown communities. The disparities are because those conditions that cause kidney failure are disproportionately represented in black communities.
The former Independence Bank of Chicago is being transformed into an education hub.
In the black communities, the black and brown communities, there is a historical mistrust of healthcare in general.
Wilkins grew up in the Chatham neighborhood, became a trauma surgeon, and is now the CEO of Gift of Hope, an organization providing organ and tissue services.
Only way we can really address that is through education.
Is this what is going to happen here? It's empty now.
Yes, it's empty now. It's under construction. But one of the things is we're going to have community outreach centered here.
Despite there being 7.4 million registered donors in Illinois, there's still a need for living donors. Patient David Rodriguez at UI Health says his journey to find a donor in his family was difficult.
Piensan que el donar se van a morir. Mucha gente lo que piensa y no lo hacen.
¿Y ha aprendido ya que eso no es cierto?
Pues a quien nos ha tocado ya lo aprendimos, a los que no, pues siguen en esa situación de no ser donante, ¿ve?
The team at UI Health say myths about donation often steer people away from wanting to donate.
People think that after donating a kidney, they will be on medication, that now they're missing an organ that they need.
At some point, we've all heard the myth that doctors won't work as hard to save your life if you're a registered donor. Wilkins says that's not true.
If you register your intent to be an organ donor, then you become a donor upon your death.
In the meantime, organizations like the Gift of Hope and physicians at UI Health are working to restore trust between communities by giving them access to information.
That patients can feel that there is a place for them where they can come and be seen in their own native language.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
Since the Spanish language clinic opened, more than 160 patients have signed up with the clinic, and the Gift of Hope Hub in Chatham is expected to be open by the end of the year. And that's our show for this Tuesday night. Don't forget, you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. City Council's first ever discussion on NASCAR's street race as parking restrictions and street closures begin. Plus, Marvel characters come to life in paintings by a local artist who's a master of the medium. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a proud sponsor of diversity, equity, and inclusion-focused free continuing legal education for lawyers throughout the region.